Welcome to our presentation. You know, we can see absolutely nothing, so if you all raise your hands, we can't see that. But I am Kim McMahon. I am the head of marketing with Sidero. And they're really loud over there. So I'm head of marketing with Sidero. I have been working with open source communities ever since I worked with Amanda in 2017. I have done marketing for open source foundations and worked for organizations that had both open source projects and for-profit products. Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I work over at NetApp Instaclustr within open source data infrastructure, and I am stoked to be here today to give back to the community. I was along with the Kubernetes journey for over a decade now, and it is time to share back what I've learned. So who do we have in the room today? I got to kind of come up a little bit. Do we have any engineers out there?
Oh, I see some hands. There we go.
How about product management? All right. How about anybody in support?
One.
Kinda.
One person. It's all the rest are supporting something.
What about community folks? Nice. Sales? Marketing? We got one person over here. And anything else that we're missing?
What?
Executive. Got it. All right. Well, welcome today. So it looks like we have a mix of people in the room today that work on either open source projects or most likely within for-profit products. So we have people who are working directly with revenue with that tie. We've got product managers who help build a roadmap. We've got a lot of engineers who help bring that to market. Then we have people who support users and using products within community, along with those revenue generating folks directly in sales and marketing. So we have this in interlocking circles up here showing that everybody has to work together in order to be successful. In this presentation, we're going to talk about, connecting those open source activities with corporate goals. We're going to go through that elephant in the room, revenue, which used to be a bad name in open source. We're going to go through creating a charter, some metrics, making sure we know what we're doing. That user journey, so helping people select technologies, and then we're going to share some examples so that you know how this is used in real life.
So I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, and I started talking about this at events, I think last year around this time, that businesses are in organizations, they need to generate revenue. Now, they may contribute back to open source and be big open source fans, so to speak. For example, Amanda's organization does a lot of contributions back to open source, but at the end of the day, organizations need to generate revenue. So they need to generate revenue to pay for the product managers who are figuring out the roadmap and what you're going to do with open source and with your products or with your sales and marketing teams, what you're going to paying your engineers who are working likely on both open source projects and on products. And it's kind of a team paycheck concept. And we need to accept and embrace the fact that even though we're working in open source, at some point we've got to sell something so that we can continue to contribute back to the community as well as contributing to the organization's bottom line. So.
All right. So you get into your organization and what do you do first? Well, you need to have the ability to communicate with others exactly what you're working on and how that ties with the company's goals. So how do you start this? So the best way to start is to create a charter to line up everybody and make sure everybody is moving in the same direction and that you're easily able to go back and explain your relevance within the organization. It also serves as a framework and gives you the ability to say no, which is important because sometimes when you're in open source teams, the ability to say no to 100% revenue generating activities is something that you and your team really want the ability to do. So to start this off, really that first step is to talk with a lot of people. So what I typically do when I go in with a new team is I set up 15-minute interviews with as many people as possible. So those are people like individual contributors all the way up to the CEO, depending on what kind of company that you're at. So I ask them 4 simple questions. And I like to do this live because it gives you the opportunity for people to know who you are. It up-levels yourself and lets everybody know that you're serious about the job that you're going to do. So I ask them, do you have experience working with open source or developer teams? What's your view on how things are currently working? This gives you a good idea of what people think is important and what they don't think is important. It's also a good way for people to tell you what they don't think is working, which is usually what comes out in this question. Also, what's going to define success for you? This is a nice question to ask, especially when you're talking all the way up your management chain so that you know what you're going to be graded on and what they expect from you. And then what are the expectations of the program itself, which will give you like just a really good idea from a lot of different people about what people are expecting. To give you an idea of how many interviews that I've done before, the last time I did this, I reached over 30 people and just talked to them. Everybody's willing to give you 15 minutes, so take advantage of that opportunity. So once you have that, you have time to really sit down and think and create that team charter. So I like to create the team charter and then send that out to the team and ask them to please trash it. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what you disagree with. That gets a lot of engagement going amongst your team and brings everybody together focused on the same goals. Now, whether this go down the path of you use the wrong verb, which I've spent days discussing which verbs go where, or if it goes down the path of, hey, I really don't think we should do this, but we should really do this. Inside that charter, when I'm creating it, this is an easy way to tie in and balance those goals out. So if you have an open source engineering team, this is a great way to pull out exactly that we're going to go learn from the community and innovate with the community and bring that back into product roadmaps. And so then the product managers can go ahead and create that roadmap from that. So you're really going to reach on, why does this team exist? You know, and that paragraph comes in handy a lot, especially when you have a lot of new people or turnover at your company. You just repetitively copy and paste that out. You're also going to put in some strategic objectives. I like to stick with 3. Anything over 3, you're probably going to fail. And while failing is good, it's good to set up your team for success right out of the gate. So stick to 3, keep it simple. What does success look like? And, you know, how are you going to reach that? This isn't metrics, which we'll get into. This is those higher level goals so that you know that you're doing a good job and that you're meeting the needs that you want and how you're going to do it. So once you have this all together and you send this up and get this approved, you have a charter that everybody's agreed on. Now, of course, you're going to have to report out. Who doesn't love a good monthly report? So the first time I worked on OKRs was with this guy named Craig McCluckey, and I did not like OKRs. I did not want to sit in that room one bit. And what I found is if you go to your charter and you take those exact objectives that you've already gotten approved up your management chain, and those are just your objectives within your OKRs, there's no conversation, there's no back and forth. You've already agreed to it, and that's what you're going to do. And then you can do your key results, so your specific things you have to do within that quarter. I like to track these within a spreadsheet so that I easily have access to a lot of data. And also I just use color codes, red, yellow, green. So in month 1, let's say you didn't do anything towards something, it's red. You know that the second month you need to start there and concentrate there, and your teams can pick that up pretty easy and they know what to do. I also do a percentage complete. So if you know if you did 50% on one thing, that's cool, but you did 0 on another, again, it's easy to know. So when you go to report this out, I just stick to 3 trends that you've already found in the data, not all the data. Your 2 to 3 top trends, no need to do any more than that. If people have questions, they're going to come through and ask you questions. Then you have all of the data in one spot where you can drill down. Kim, how have you used this before?
Well, I use it, since I am in marketing and supporting the sales organization, I use it for our MQLs, which are our leads. And I have a lot in my spreadsheet, similar to what Amanda's spreadsheets are. There's a lot of data that gives me indicators of if my MQLs are up or down and what maybe is leading to that.
Awesome. So now that we have that down, Kim's going to talk to us more about that user journey, what that looks like.
Yep. So now that Amanda has told me what the charter is, we're gonna figure out how we are going to be talking to people. And I will take her charter and I will make sure that I understand, like, what is the real goal? What are we trying to get out of it that marketing, advocacy, and community can drive results for? So it could be for awareness. We could be just trying to get awareness of the company or our technologies, maybe the people in our organization. It could be that one of our goals is to get feedback back to product management. Or it could be that we're really working to collaborate maybe with our internal teams as well as with the community. So which of these are going to help best support the charter that Amanda has put together? So once I have that, we're going to start going on what I call a user journey. And this journey here on this map, I'll go into details on the next slide with how we will do each one of these. This is a typical sales journey, but it can be used for an open source project. We want awareness of the project, and we want advocates for the project. It could be for a product, it could be for the company. It really applies across however it is that we want to talk to the users in our organization and encourage them to do some sort of activity, hopefully to help with your OKRs. So awareness. That it's the basic one. It's the first one that we want to make sure that we're focused on, that we're getting awareness for what we're doing and what our technologies are. And the typical tools that we're going to use for this, the usual suspects, the website, we're going to go to events, we're going to write some content, do some social advertising, etc. But this is also where our DevRel, our dev advocates, and our community people have a big role in helping drive awareness of what we're trying to do. Consideration is when we're getting their hands on the technology, whether they're going out and downloading an open source project or whether they are going to do a product trial or a demo or a proof of concept. And some of the tools that I've used to help drive that consideration is it's going to be website as well, properly place buttons on your website if you're trying to get them to try a product. But I'm going to take those names that I've gathered in my awareness phase, and I'm going to maybe send them some emails, a few emails. We don't send a lot of emails when we're working with developer communities and in open source, but we send emails that have high value content, such as the technology proof. This is how the technology works. Here's how it compares to some of the other options. Here is how some other organizations are doing this, solving issues, real issues they have with our technologies. And then the decision making, this is where marketing and advocacy, if we're trying to help somebody with the decision to buy, we're going to be working closely with the sales team, and a lot of times case studies and testimonials come in. With decision making on using a technology, even if it's an open source project, just as CNCF talks about many of their case studies, that helps people learn more about the technologies and what may work in their environment, making the decision to put that in their production stack. Then with retention, it's always easier to keep people than get them there in the first place. So this is doing regular interactions. You're going to see the support and the product team. They have primarily this responsibility, but marketing, advocacy, and community also do, just by talking to people about how they're using the technology. Are they happy with it? Maybe you have put together some user groups, maybe have referral programs, for example. And then the advocates, these are our dream people. This is who we want in our open source communities, or if you have also advocate programs for your products. These are the ones who are talking about our technology without us asking them to. They're writing those articles. And so you can put together, if you want to reward them and grow that, you can put together an advocate program, or even offer a reward type program. But before we do that, we also need to know who we're talking to. So Amanda didn't give that to me with her charter. She just told me to go do this. So I'm going to figure out who I'm talking to. Who are the people that are going to use the open source project or the technology, whether it's a developer, whether it's a user, it could be the influencer, it could be the technical decision maker, which oftentimes I'm finding in my role is the operator or the business decision maker. And I don't even know when I created this chart, but I'm sharing this just as an example. I go into a lot of detail when I'm talking about who the personas are. You know, what are they a user? Why do I care about them? What do they care about? What's their goal? So I'm trying to get into the mind of each of these users so that when I'm going to produce content or I'm going to talk to them at an event, I'm going to try to get that conversation and that content to be something that they're going to care about and that they find valuable. So I know who they are, and I know how I'm going to go get to them. I need to make sure that I know what my technologies, what they are, what they solve, how it makes it easier for each one of those personas. Why would they be looking for something new? Why do we think that they don't like the current solution they have? And what's at stake if they don't solve the problem? And I will write this down in a Google Doc and share it with the team, and so that we can all together collaborate and make sure that we understand why somebody cares about our technologies. And then when we put it all together, I put these in the three phases that most of us in this room, the marketing and advocacy and community people, are focused on. But the awareness, we're going to be targeting all of our decision makers with the web contents, and everybody who's involved, coming back to the people that raised their hands, everybody is involved in the awareness phase, from the support team to the engineers talking about it, knowing how to talk about our products. But it's mostly a marketing, community, and DevRel function, and we're like dragging everybody else along with us to help with this phase. During the consideration, it's marketing, community, DevRel, sales steps in, where we're helping people understand the benefit of using it, getting their hands on the technology. And then once we get to the decision makers, we're really trying to use those case studies and testimonials to help them understand and prove to them that this could really work in their environment. And I think with that, Amanda, we have a couple examples that we want to share with you.
Sure. So what does this look like? So with these examples, you may think that we're describing your company. I promise you we're not directly describing your company, but I think a lot of us can see us in how these work. So our first example here is that restructuring. Who hasn't been through a restructure lately? Super fun. So this is a large
Nobody
vendor.
raised their hand.
Nobody raised their hand?
Nobody's gone through a restructuring recently. Okay. Just you and I.
Just a large vendor with multiple open source projects as well as for sale products. And the open source teams were distributed, so we had a lot of open source engineers who directly reported into product folks, which meant that a lot of the goals that they were around were very product specific and really had nothing to do with open source engagement or what they were doing. So we had team members who were completely isolated and who really just they weren't sticky at all. They just went to work and worked by themselves and went home. So the solution was pulling everybody together into a group because we needed to solve cohesiveness. We had to put some processes in place, and we definitely needed some more open source metrics. So really getting together on that charter, making sure everybody was going in the same direction, knowledge sharing back and forth between the different communities and how best to go about engagement within each project, making sure that the general manager approved, what that looked like, and making sure people were executing and delivering what was needed. So the results were that the team really were more sticky. They wanted to work on the team because now all of a sudden they had goals that were relevant. They could see themselves in the company goals and how that all rolled up. processes had put in place was, if there's a product and through tech ops and as they dig through and they find out that the issue is actually in the open source project, team members were in place then to solve customer issues, and that resulted in a 90% customer resolution for there, and improved employee satisfaction.
Okay. The next example is a company, an organization bringing in their first marketing or advocacy hire. And this will be, typically you're going to see this in smaller organizations. They've had maybe marketing help before, maybe somebody on staff, or maybe they have contracted that out. But they realized that they were not getting the results that they had hoped for. They were looking for a specific growth trajectory, and through that, they needed leads, and they needed to grow the community. They knew they needed community growth for the open source project, and they needed leads for the revenue side of the business. So they went out and they hired a head of marketing to come in and put together the strategy and the messaging, and then to execute on that strategy. And one of the first steps was to research what had they done in the past, what works, what didn't work, as well as setting up tracking. Without data, how do we ever know if what we are doing is working at all? So they put those things together, they started executing on the plan, and with the plan that they executed, it was focused on awareness and technology proof, which is typically what a first marketing hire is going to focus on. Just through some of those, the efforts, the SEO, the PR, the additional content, the increased presence on social media, this organization saw their web metrics grow 3 times in terms of how many pages people were visiting on their website, as well as how long they were staying. They grew the names in their database by twice as many, going month to month, and twice as many product trials. So they had a good month. Amanda.
And our third example, and this is completely made up, is an established organization, and they're a very large cloud-native vendor. They contribute to open source projects. They've created their own. They've donated some to a foundation, and they also use open source technology within their for-sale products. The current situation was really that it was a planning cycle was coming up, so that's when you get budget and headcount, and they realized that they were just going through the motions. Everybody was just showing up for work every day and then going home every day. There was no innovation happening at all. So the solution was to go back and question everything and to think differently, and to go back to that company goals and realize, what thread they played within open source, but really delivering on the company goals. And really brainstorming and just holding meetings, what anything is possible, right? Like, what should we actually be doing? And they needed to solve for being relevant. So every year on those planning cycles, you need to make sure you're still relevant with what's coming up, like what the company is actually going to deliver the next year. So in some of those things, really doubling down on what pieces of content people were working on. So in the past, it was a lot of blogs. People were in front of their computers and people were reading. Fast forward to today, people are watching videos. And guess what? Attention spans are under 2 minutes now watching things. That's a completely different approach to what you're creating. Also, people are going to conferences again. Look at this conference right here. It is packed. So doubling down on CFPs and making sure that key people were giving talks, giving back to the community, also spreading awareness of the company and what they were working on. So as they did this, making sure they also connected back to marketing, that user journey Kim talked about before, and seeing where content could weave in to help deliver what needed to be delivered at that level. And that's what they did. They continued to be relevant, and their team kept their jobs.
Yay, they kept their job. And that's all we have for you today. We specifically left time for some questions. I believe there's a microphone in the middle of the room, and this QR code is to leave session feedback. CNCF would like session feedback, so feel free to do that. But do we have any questions? No questions?
0 questions? Amazing. Actually, I can't even see. So
I know, I can't. Yeah. Okay. Well, you all get 5 minutes free. Thank you.
thank you.